everyone, you are watching ITV Gold and I'm your host Aditi Lama, and today we bring you another entertaining event with the Indo-American Arts Council, obviously our very dear favorite. And right now I'm joined by Priya Krishna. She's a name that's very, very popular on everywhere, and currently we're very excited to have her. She will also be the one moderating this entire amazing food talk with Madhur Jaffrey. Thank you so much for being with us here, Priya.
Thanks for having me.
Madhur, what an amazing event this is. Today we'll be talking to a legend of, Indian food, cookbooks, TV hostings, somebody who's also an actress, somebody who's really made her name and truly is inspirational for any South Asian woman.
Definitely.
Coming from that industry and, having that success yourself and then interacting with someone like her, what does that do for you?
I feel like Madhur was definitely an early inspiration, not just for me, but for my mom, who's the co-author of my cookbook.
Right.
Like, she kind of blazed the trail. Without her, without, a big-time author, and a big-time publishing company taking a chance on her book so many years ago, someone probably wouldn't have taken a chance on my book in 2017.
Right.
So,
I have to ask you, a lot of, authors here and people that are, the young professionals in the food industry here are often admiring people such as Madhur. What have they done for, people from our community, especially young women like you? What has she done in order to really, make it a bit easier for you, which perhaps she didn't have, you think?
Yeah, I mean, the fact that her books did so well made it more likely for publishers to take a chance on other books by South Asian authors. Also, just I think for any South Asian, seeing someone who looks like them on the cover of a cookbook on television, that's really impactful. We feel seen, we feel motivated, like we can do this and we can make it in this industry.
Definitely. And just talking a little bit about food, I have to ask you, as being, a young South Asian woman yourself, someone who's definitely a pioneer in the industry, what's your take on the Indian food industry here? And especially, what do you think is the American perspective over the years that you've seen when you take a look at Indian food and how it's depicted and perhaps, discuss at this point?
I want to say a little disappointed, and it's one thing I really want to talk about
that's
tonight.
very honest.
It's that, I think there are a lot of really amazing Indian chefs out there, people like Preeti Mistry, people like Marwan Irani, who are doing unbelievable Indian food. Right. But I think in general, the American understanding of Indian food is still really limited to the word curry, butter chicken, and I feel like we're all working to sort of break through those stereotypes, but it's taking a lot. Like, they've definitely stuck for a long time.
As a millennial, as somebody who's really trying to sort of showcase the Indian blend into the American cuisine that you are trying to depict with your flavors, what sort of things do you think will help you connect with masses your age, and what kind of flavors or what kind of vibrance of the Indian cuisine do you want to show? What do you think is missing right now that we really need to work on?
Well, I think that one thing that publications need to do is normalize Indian food in the canon of American cooking.
Normalize.
Right now, when you see Indian food depicted in a magazine, it's like a spread from a restaurant. It's treated as like difficult project cooking. What if a kachumber could be used in a salad roundup?
True.
If a dal could be used in like a comfort food roundup? I feel like the more that we normalize words like dal and curry and sabzi, the more that people other than Indians and Indians themselves are going to connect with this cuisine.
So I definitely have to ask you, I have had the pleasure of working with some amazing food bloggers that are very popular on Instagram, and they're all working on Indian fusion recipes, Indian fusion takes, blending a cuisine of Mexican flavors with an Indian dish. What is your take on that? And do you think that we are at a time where cuisines need to blend in order to sort of raise more awareness and maybe also open up the space for more cookbook authors, for a diverse variety in what is being showcased from the food?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's only natural. My mother, who I wrote this book with, she was born and raised in India, but she learned to cook in the U.S. with American ingredients.
Oh, wow.
So, she makes her saag paneer with feta instead of paneer. She makes dahi toast with sourdough bread from California.
Wow.
I think these are just things that immigrants do when they come to a new place, and I think that evolution is a really wonderful thing.
I think I was watching a video of yours, and in there was a behind-the-scene take in which your mom called. and you were discussing something with her. Does that happen a lot with you when you're filming? Yes.
Yeah, my parents and I FaceTime quite a bit.
Quite a bit, right? Why, I ask you this because for the young South Asians that could be watching this, give me a little comment on connecting with parents, and why do you think it's important for our generation to sort of sustain that?
I mean, I think it's. I don't want to generalize, but
it's
for all
very
the
adorable, your
Desis
FaceTime
that I know, like it is kind of hard to connect with your parents. Like the relationship between Desi kids and Desi parents is very different between the relationship between like white kids and white parents.
Yeah,
like
especially here,
Yeah, I feel like my parents have always been an authority. They're not the kind of person you gab with or treat like your best friend.
Yeah.
But I feel like I've come to really love that is my relationship with my parents. Like they're people I can tell stuff to, but like I really, really look up to them, and they are authority figures and people I go to for wisdom. And my mom is like a very intense person, and she brought that intensity to the book, and that's why it's good.
Yeah, and she's definitely influenced so much of the cooking and everything. I have to ask you, choosing a very unconventional field and being South Asian, I'm sure you get asked this question a lot. What's your comment on sort of, letting parents, giving their kids the freedom to pursue their dreams? Quite often we're still discussing I still sometimes my dad's like, are you sure you don't want to go to law school? I'm like, why?
Yeah. Up until like 3 years ago, my dad was like, why not business school?
Yeah. Or why not just go into that one aspect of the food industry where you're just making the money?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it makes sense. The immigrant mentality is very much like I worked my, tail off so that you could be a banker, a doctor, a lawyer, you could have a high starting salary, but my passion was my passion, and I think my parents recognized pretty early on that I was willing to hustle for my passion, and I think that the way that they saw it is they were like, if she can really succeed in this field, if she's really that passionate, like it'll work out.
Yeah, so. having so many outlets, Priya, at such a young age, with a cookbook, with being so popular on YouTube and other platforms, what are some of now your very active goals for the next couple of years? And in terms of raising the South Asian influence and having that identity in food industry, what's your take on that with yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to do more video. It really does seem like those YouTube videos are like resonating not just with Desis but with non-Desis. I'd love to do a lot more television. I feel like that's a really great medium to reach a lot of people. I would love to kind of do to Indian cooking what Martin Yan did for Chinese cooking. He made it something that people were making at their homes on an everyday basis. I just want everyone to be making dal chawal on a Tuesday night.
Yes, because that was such a normal part of your life.
Yeah, exactly.
You lived here. And,
exactly.
We love celebrating diversity, and we love celebrating South Asian voices. We're talking about a very politically active year. You have 2020 coming up next year. No political questions, but just your comment on being an active South Asian American voice. How important do you think that is for us to establish that identity in which everything is normal and included?
I think it's so important. I think one thing I try to draw a distinction of is I don't want to speak for every South Asian American. We all have different experiences, but if my very specific experience can resonate with someone, can make someone who's never made Indian food before make Indian food before, then I'm happy about it.
Definitely. And one last question for you. Indo-American Arts Council, they do amazing work. They bring incredible events, really prolific authors, incredible personalities such as yourself. A little comment on the council and, all the works they've been doing.
I mean, I am just excited about any kind of Indian organization. I didn't grow up around, I had a small Indian community, but I only sort of developed a professional Indian community once I graduated from college, and I wish that I have that. So, I'm happy for all organizations that exist to sort of bring South Asians together.
Well, Priya, it was a pleasure having you here with us. I would love for you to give one last message to our audience, and especially to young South Asian professionals that are, blogging for food, that are writing for food, that are passionate for food, that Indian American blend. One comment for all of them to our camera.
Yeah, just don't forget to just authentically be yourself. Don't be afraid to speak your exact truth. Don't worry about alienating people, having people think something might be too foreign or different or weird. Like, people like when people are their true selves. So be that.
Well, those were some really words of wisdom for sure. Priya Krishna, everyone. Follow her on all her media handles, and obviously follow us to see all our conversations with her. Thank you.
I love doing things in front of a room full of faces. I'm sure, Madhur, you can agree they're the biggest supporters and the first people to point out when you've done something wrong. Like, that's not how you make pav bhaji. It always comes from other faces. So one of the questions that Madhur and I have gotten asked quite a lot as we've released these books, and that Madhur has been getting asked basically since the 1970s, and that I'm only just entering, is the question, what will it take for Indian food to enter the mainstream conversation about home cooking? So I want to read from the introduction of your cookbook, your first one, Invitation to Indian Cooking, which came out in the 1970s. She says, today Americans seem to have a desire to experience the real thing, an authentic taste, a different lifestyle. If Indian food is ever to come into its own in America, this is perhaps the time for it. That was in the 1970s. How have we done?
How wrong I was. So anyway, what I was saying was that I don't think Indian food as Indian food will come into America, because what we have is not Indian food, we have regional foods. From Kashmir down to Tamil Nadu, we have different kinds of food, and those are not going to come to America in their true form. I have learned this through experience. So what will happen? Well, here we are. We have the next generation right with us sitting beside me, having written a book called Indian-ish. And I think that's what's going to happen. And so here we are. Here's Priya, who's done, she's taken real, authentic Indian food, picked real ideas from Indian authentic food, and she's put them into a kind of modern way of American eating. And I think that's absolutely wonderful, and if it comes from us, it's always good. I think that's one form, to answer your question, that is going to take. It's going to take other forms. But I think they will be based on American styles of eating. And it will be the Indian touches that go into the American style of eating. So we are all very taken with the burrito. Americans are very taken with the idea of burrito. So why not sneak in a chapati and sneak in a roti and put it in that form? So I think that's more likely to happen and is happening.
I mean, what is it like publishing a book now about Indian food versus when you were working with Judith Jones? Were you getting a lot more pushback from her? Were you her only Indian author?
It was impossible to write about anything that was not Indian for Judith Jones. Now, I don't know how many of you are familiar with her. She was one of the great, great, great food editors who died in her 90s, publishing one of my second last book, I think she did. She was a wonderful editor. However, she thought I could not write about anything but Asia. And even though I knew nothing about the Philippines, I knew nothing about Thailand, it was okay to write about Thailand or the Philippines. That's sort of Asia, is that part. But I couldn't write about Italy, Italian food. I could not write about Swedish food. I couldn't write about anything else, even though I knew as much about that. In fact, much more than I knew about Filipino food. So I think there was a built-in resistance to an Indian writer. They don't look at an Indian writer the way they look at an American writer. An American writer can write about anything. They're a food writer, they go learn, and they write about it. An Indian apparently can't learn anything. That has nothing to do with Western food. So I was never allowed to do that, and I remember very early on fighting with her. There was a very well-known young writer who kept writing world vegetarian cookbooks. And I said, why can't I do them? They said, again, my editor said, no, you stick to Asia. She just didn't let me till one day I did it on my own with another publisher. It's just, I couldn't bear it anymore. And these are the kind of things that stood in my way. It's changed now. You're writing about all kinds of things, which is wonderful.
Yeah. I think we've talked about this. I think there's a big generational difference between sort of how Indian ingredients get introduced to the US. So, you've seen the rise of turmeric. Khichdi has been adopted by wellness people and yoga instructors. You've got chai, yeah. And, a lot of the times the people running these companies are not Indians. They're, white people who went to India and discovered chai or discovered turmeric, and that just drives me absolutely crazy. I was made fun of for my lunch having turmeric in it growing up, and now these people who made fun of me are going to profit off of my heritage, whereas I call my mom and I'm like, Mom, this woman started this chai company, she calls it chai tea, and like I'm furious about it. And my mom's like, when I immigrated here, no one even knew what chai was, no one knew what turmeric was. Like, you should be happy that these things are happening. And I understand her perspective, but I still feel angry about it.
No, I quite understand. I feel the same way. Just upsetting. But it's going to be what it's going to be, and it's nice to see. In a way, it's not nice. Nice is not the right word. It's kind of very interesting to see the evolution. And I've been watching it for a long, long time. And it's interesting to see how these things have evolved. And I think my perspective is the one that has watched for 50 years or so every change that has happened and how it has happened and how it seems to be going and what direction it seems to be going. It is fascinating to see. I couldn't have predicted this. I would have thought that we would slowly understand the Indian food and regional Indian food. And I've always thought, this is another thing, that a country to take, accept the food of another country, they have to have a passionate relationship with that country. England had, for whatever reason, good or bad, a passionate relationship with India. They were conquerors. They ruled the land. They were masters. They stood astride the land. They considered it their land. And they took away a lot of ideas on the food, on recipes. They liked the food. And of course, as you know, in Indian history, you will find out that what the English in the beginning came and could only bring, they didn't bring women. So when they came to India, they took on mistresses and they had children with the mistresses, or wives sometimes. And you see that in their recorded wills, that a lot of money was left to the wives and children. Now, it was very interesting. The children that were light-skinned and could pass were sent to England for their education. The children who were dark and couldn't pass were kept in India. So there are a lot of people in England with Indian blood floating around because they passed and they could get away with it. And I think that deep kind of connection to India has always been there in England. And I think it will never die as a result. And the relationship to Indian food is therefore very strong. America has had no connection to India at all. We've had no war. Go fight India, then you like Indian food. That's and I think they have not learned. Their army has not been there. Their people have not been there in masses at any point in their history. And it's such a young country. So it's just beginning to learn about food. I mean, they're eating what the beginnings of food. They have to evolve a cuisine. And we are all going to be a part, you and your children are going to be a part of what this cuisine evolves into, because there are a whole lot of us who have a say in the matter. And these things you can't tell them to happen. It's like language. You can't tell language, go this way or go that way, we won't use these words, we will use these words. Language picks up the words it wants and it goes its own way. And I think food does exactly the same thing. It picks up what it wants to. What forces are pulling and pushing, it depends on the time. It will be what it will be. We don't know. But I think all of us should try and make some kind of effort to make the impression we want to make it go the way we want to. We may be able to help, we may not.
Madhur Jaffrey, thank you so much for being with us here on ITV Gold. It's such a pleasure and honor to have you here.
It's lovely to be here.
You know, when people research on you and when people discuss on you, you're known as India's most celebrated cookbook author. You're known as someone who's truly defined entertainment, you've defined television. Your family has a legacy in the industry itself. So my question to you would be, coming from that era, coming from so much history, how do you celebrate India? And how has your family and the legacy celebrated India? I don't know, trick question.
I'm an Indian. I live as an Indian in America. I eat Indian food, but I'm living in America, so I eat other foods as well. I dress sometimes completely like an Indian, but sometimes as a modern Indian who is able to wear anything I want to wear. So I celebrate my country because of who I am. I am Indian. I don't need to prove it to anybody. I know who I am, and I live my life as an Indian in America.
I just want to ask you, you've spoken in great depth about having a certain amount of history attached to a pre-partition India, then moving to London and really exploring food because you were a migrant who was in search for food and you found that connection. Now that you've been an actress, very celebrated actress, to a cookbook author, to a celebrated TV host, the journey of food has truly inspired an identity of yours. Wouldn't you say that? When you look back at that, what are you the most grateful for? I'm just grateful for my own curiosity, that I had the curiosity to keep going and explore different aspects of the cultural world. I'm interested in a lot of things. I'm interested in painting, I'm interested in architecture. These are all things that I love, absolutely love. I can't do everything, but I've done some of the things that my instincts tell me that I want to do and love to do. You know, a lot of young Indian chefs, a lot of young cook authors, they all look up to you. Even Priya, when she was talking so candidly about the connection she has with you. What's that one key advice you like to give to these individuals? In terms of an advice that you wish perhaps you had, or a key advice that you really think has been a determinant to your success?
Well, I'll tell you one thing. This younger lot of people, like Priya and so many others, they don't need any advice from me. They know where they're going. I'm so happy that they're bright young things. They know what's needed. They follow their hearts and they're doing amazing things. Some of them are writers, some of them are cooks, some of them are writers and cooks, some are
bloggers.
Exploring.
Exploring
our history. I just know somebody who recently wrote a wonderful piece on Indians who started coming to Mexico in the 1900s.
Wow.
And married Mexican women and what their food was like. So they're doing amazing stuff. And I have nothing to teach them. They have a lot to teach me. They are wonderful people.
You're so nice. You know, we are sort of coming close to a wrap. I have to ask you something on the Indo-American Arts Council. They do an incredible job in bringing a lot of prolific authors, and I have an incredible time with them. You know, interacting with the crowd here today and talking about your new book and, you know, talking about how the Instant Pot is now the huge aspect of this book. How was this experience for you? And I have to ask you, is the catered market for this cookbook millennials, people like myself who would be using the Instant Pot?
Yes, it is. It is for the younger people, but it's also for older people who don't have too many hours to cook or time to cook or energy to cook. The Instant Pot requires very little energy, that's the thing. So you put everything in the pot, especially if you're making simple things like beans and rice and a simple curry or a simple meat dish. All you have to do is assemble all the things, put them in, and push the correct buttons.
That's all.
And that's all. And then you have your meal. It's quite amazing.
A message to this council?
Well, the council's been doing amazing things since I first came to the council.
Wow.
And I hope it will continue, and I'm sure it will continue to do wonderful things for the arts.
Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.